Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm NILE and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says it is unfortunate that India has rebuffed Islamabad's efforts for peace. Addressing the inaugural ceremony of Pakistan's first ever Islamabad Security Dialogue, Imran Khan said if India gives the Kashmiris their rights, then the whole region will change, benefiting both the countries. The Prime Minister also launched an advisory portal for the National Security Division, which will engage think tanks and academia in policy making. President Joe Biden says Russian President Vladimir Putin will soon face consequences for trying to swing the last year U.S. election to Donald Trump. His comments come after a U.S. intelligence report accused Putin of meddling in the election. Moscow has denied the allegations as baseless. In Afghanistan, the government says its forces have killed 34 Taliban fighters in aerial bombings in the southern Kandahar province. The defense ministry said the Air Force targeted the Taliban in Arghandab, Panjwai, Zehrai, and Spin Boldak districts of the province. Condemning the bombing, the Taliban called it a violation of the Doha peace agreement. The group said it reserves the right to retaliate and foreign forces will be responsible for the action. Pakistan has received the second batch of 500,000 COVID-19 vaccines from China. Pakistan has registered over 2,300 new cases and 61 deaths overnight, as its toll tops 13,600. Meanwhile, Brazil's number of daily COVID-19 fatalities has hit another new high, with 2,841 people dead overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.6 million lives and infected over 120 million people. And in football, Real Madrid have strolled into the quarterfinals of the Champions League, beating Atalanta 4-1 on aggregate. They comfortably beat Atalanta 3-1 at home in their second lead of the knockout stage to qualify for the final eight of the first time since 2018. Welcome back. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says it is unfortunate that India has rebuffed Islamabad's efforts for peace. He was addressing the inaugural ceremony of Pakistan's first ever Islamabad Security Dialogue. Khan said if India gives the Kashmiris their United Nations mandate rights, the region will then change, benefiting both the countries. He said Pakistan has always tried to resolve the Kashmir issue through dialogue. The premier said good relations with neighbors in the region are paramount for national security. He lauded Islamabad's role in the Afghan peace process and said Pakistan has the second biggest stake in the country's peace. The premier also pointed to the issue of climate change and said that it is also in the paradigm of national security. The Prime Minister also launched an advisory portal for the National Security Division. It will engage think tanks and academia in policy making. In Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the occupying troops continue their so-called cordon and search operations for the fifth straight day as Kashmiris fear for their lives. The Indian forces conducted house-to-house search operations in multiple districts, including Srinagar, Shopian, and Pulwama. They continue their practice of pulling residents out of their homes, parading and harassing them in the streets. This comes after Indian troops martyred 2 Kashmiri youths during these inhuman military operations. In Afghanistan, the government says its forces have killed 34 Taliban fighters in aerial bombings in the southern Kandahar province. The Defense Ministry said the Air Force targeted the Taliban in Aghraband, Banjwai, Zehrai, and Spin Boldak districts of the province. The ministry said 2 Taliban strongholds and a large number of weapons and ammunition were also destroyed. Condemning the bombing, the Taliban called it a violation of the Doha peace agreement. The group said it reserves the right to retaliate and foreign forces will be responsible for the action. The United Nations nuclear watchdog says Iran has started enriching uranium at its underground Natanz plant with a second type of advanced centrifuge. In a report, International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran is using thousands of centrifuges installed in 3 types of advanced cascades to enrich uranium for up to 5%. The nuclear watchdog said Iran seeks to enrich uranium up to 5% at the plant. Iran has recently accelerated its breaches of the 2015 nuclear deal's restrictions on its nuclear activities to pressure Washington into lifting its sanctions. Tehran argues that its breaches are in accordance with the deal as other signatories fail to fulfill their end of the accord. President Joe Biden says Russian President Vladimir Putin will soon face consequences for trying to swing the last year U.S. election to Donald Trump. His comments come after a U.S. intelligence report accused Putin of meddling in the election, an accusation Russia denies. But he said that there are certain areas where the two countries can work together, such as renewing the Arms Control Treaty, START. Released on Tuesday, the intelligence report has also accused Iran of interfering in the election. U.S. media reports both countries could face sanctions as soon as next week. Russia says the United Kingdom's decision to boost its nuclear arsenal will harm international stability. Russian state media attributed these comments to the foreign ministry. The Kremlin says Britain's plans to expand its nuclear capabilities have dealt a serious blow to disarmament. Moscow said it will take London's move into account when working on its military plans. This comes after Britain announced it will increase its nuclear warhead stockpile by more than 40%. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the increase takes into account technological threats and risky global environments. The United States has responded to the warning by North Korea, saying that it will always maintain its ability to defend itself. This comes after the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un cautioned Washington against causing a stink if it wants peace. Addressing the Senate Armed Services Committee, Air Force General Glenn Van Herrick said Pyongyang's considerably larger and presumably more capable ballistic missiles have further increased the threat to the United States. Van Herrick noted that the North Korean regime has released itself from a moratorium on testing over a year ago. He warned that Pyongyang may begin flight testing and improved ballistic missile design in the near future. Meanwhile, the White House says Washington's focus in North Korea policy will be on diplomacy and denuclearization. At least 58 people have been killed in an attack on a convoy in Tillaberi region of southwestern Niger. In a statement, the government spokesperson said militias carried out targeted executions of passengers. He said the terrorists also killed people and burned their huts in a nearby village of Dari D. The government has declared a 3-day national mourning for the victims. No group has claimed responsibility for the massacre yet. Nigerian authorities say nearly 40 students kidnapped last week from a college in northwest Kaduna State are safe. In an interview, the Kaduna governor ruled out negotiations or paying ransom to the kidnappers for their release. He said Nigeria's armed forces are engaged in a surveillance operations after the kidnappings. However, due to the recurrent kidnappings, the government's efforts are at risk right now. In a separate incident on Monday, 3 teachers were abducted in the Kaduna by the attackers who stormed a primary school. Since December 2020, gunmen have abducted nearly 1,000 Nigerian students in raids on schools and hostels. Syrian army says its air defenses have intercepted Israeli missiles on the outskirts of the capital Damascus. It said Israel launched an attack from direction of the occupied Golan Heights to target the Syrian military assets. The army said the strikes only caused material damage. This comes as the world marks the 10th anniversary of the uprising in Syria that led to a devastating conflict. Israeli forces have wounded 11 Palestinians in a raid on a town in the northern outskirts of the occupied East Jerusalem. In a statement, Palestine Red Crescent Society said the Israeli army stormed the town of Kafr Aqab. It said a military bulldozer barged in after demolishing the wall surrounding the town. The Red Crescent said the troops used rubber bullets and tear gas against the Palestinian youths. The United States has called on the international community to designate Lebanon's Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. This comes shortly after a delegation from the group met with Russia's foreign minister in Moscow. The head of Hezbollah's parliamentary bloc led a 4-member delegation to meet with Sergei Lavrov, and the United States Department condemned the visit and the invite from Moscow. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Hezbollah is designated as a foreign terrorist organization under the United States law. In an interview, Price urged all countries to reject the false distinction between the group's military and political wings. Myanmar's most powerful group of Buddhist monks has called on the military to end the violence against protesters. It accused the armed minority of torture and killing innocent civilians since last month's coup. The state Sangha Mahanyaka committee plans to release a final statement after consulting the religious affairs minister on Thursday. This comes as thousands of residents fled Yangon's industrial suburb after dozens were killed over the weekend. Elsewhere, France says the European Union will approve sanctions against coup perpetrators next week. More than 180 protesters have been killed as security forces try to crush a wave of demonstrations. In Brazil, the number of daily COVID-19 fatalities has hit another new high, with 2,841 people dead overnight. England has reported 2 cases of a new variant first reported in the Philippines. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.6 million lives and infected more than 120 million people. More in this report.
The new coronavirus variants challenging the effectiveness of vaccines and controversies over side effects of AstraZeneca have descended the world into turmoil. In the United States, Kentucky State is investigating the role of a new variant at a nursing home. Amid the suspension frenzy, the World Health Organization has donated the first Oxford vaccines to Nicaragua through its global COVAX facility. Mexico is also awaiting a response from the U.S. to request to share doses of Washington's stockpiled AstraZeneca vaccines. Meanwhile, half of the Brazilian states have implemented curfews and other restrictions to curb the unprecedented spike. However, the 4th health minister since the pandemic began pledged to continue the controversial policies of far-right President Bolsonaro.
The police belongs to the government of Bolsonaro. The police does not belong to the health ministry. The health ministry executes the government's policy only. I spoke with the team of Ministry of the Health so that we can reinforce the measures that are already being put into practice throughout Brazil and bring new contributions, always based on the best scientific evidence.
In Europe, chaos and confusion reign supreme after the suspension of the Oxford vaccine. Vaccination centers are closing their doors and appointments are being abruptly cancelled. France, too, is now investigating a new variant found in the western Brittany region that experts say is more difficult for tests to detect. Prime Minister Jean Castex says France's 3rd wave is characterized by a lot of variants. Meanwhile, several international organizations continue to make a case for AstraZeneca amid one of the biggest glitches in the pandemic response.
It is a huge problem how to solve the dilemma of how much bad press AstraZeneca has had, but putting our heads in the sand isn't going to help. Either we have to talk about it and reassure people that AstraZeneca is a good vaccine, if that proves to be the case, which I think will be proven.
India's main opposition Congress party has accused the government of exporting nearly twice the number of vaccines than the immunization conducted at home. Meanwhile, Russia has claimed that its COVID-19 vaccines have proven effective against new variants in the trials.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has received the second batch of 500,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccine from China. A special plane arrived at Islamabad's Noor Khan Air Base from China, which was received by Prime Minister Aide on Health Faisal Sultan. The country has registered over 2,300 new cases and 61 deaths overnight. The health ministry says the countrywide death toll has topped 13,600. The countrywide caseload has crossed 612,000, of which more than 575,000 people have recovered. At the United Nations, Pakistan has renewed its call for an allocation of more non-permanent seats at the Security Council to make it more representative. It was proposed by the country's permanent envoy at the United Nations Intergovernmental Negotiations on Security Council reform. Envoy Munir Akram said the Security Council's membership must be expanded so that all United Nations member states can serve on the council. He said the G4's proposal to add 6 new permanent seats would only benefit the new members and dent the efficiency of the forum. Akram also called for equitable and urgent access to vaccines for all states in order to fight the pandemic. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. An Indian Air Force pilot has been killed after his MiG Bison-21 fighter jet crashed in central India. In a tweet, the Indian Air Force said the aircraft crashed while taking off. The AIF added a court of inquiry has been ordered to determine the cause of the accident. India has long been criticized for its fleet of outdated MiG-21 Bison aircraft, which serves in only 18 air forces worldwide. According to the AIF Chief B.S. Dhana, India was operating 44-year-old fighter jets when people didn't even drive cars that were this old. A United Nations delegation is set to start a 3-day visit to a remote island where Bangladesh has moved over 13,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees. The United Nations Refugee Agency said the team will assess the conditions there and hold discussions with the authorities. Bangladesh wants to transfer 100,000 of more than 1 million refugees living in border camps in Bhasan Char Island. The island emerged from the sea only 2 decades ago and is considered vulnerable to floods. Bangladesh has dismissed the safety concerns. In the United States of Georgia, 8 people, including at least 6 Asian women, have been killed in shootings at 2 massage parlors in Atlanta. Police say they have arrested a 21-year-old Georgian man suspected of carrying out the attacks. A spokesperson for the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office said 4 people were killed at Young's Asian massage parlor. Later in Buckhead, police responding to a theft call arrived at a beauty spa and found 3 women shot dead. Authorities said they did not immediately know if the victims were targeted because of their race or ethnicity. The killings come amid a wave of recent attacks targeting Asian Americans in the United States. Ethiopia has rejected Sudan's calls for non-African mediators in the dispute over the construction of a dam on the Nile River. An Ethiopian foreign minister's spokesperson said African Union is welcome to help, but Addis Ababa will oppose mediation by other parties. He said Ethiopia believes in resolving African problems by Africans. He added the trilateral talks among Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt should be concluded between the 3 countries. Earlier, Sudan requested the Arab Union, United Nations, European Union, and the United States on forming a quadripartite mechanism for mediation. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has unveiled plans to increase the United Kingdom's stockpile of nuclear weapons. Speaking in the Parliament on the government's release of integrated review of foreign and defense policies for 2030, he said the country will shift its focus on Asia as part of a foreign policy overhaul. More in this report.
Following its exit from the European Union, Britain is exercising its options more independently, ranging from trade to countering risks. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the country is facing new technological threats and will compete against the states with opposing values. He said the UK will do more on the systemic challenge of China.
Britain will remain unswervingly committed to NATO and preserving peace and security in Europe. And from this secure basis, we will seek out friends and partners wherever they can be found, building a coalition for openness and innovation, and engaging more deeply in the Indo-Pacific.
Following Johnson's announcement, the overall cap on the country's number of nuclear warheads will now increase to 260 by the middle of the decade. The number was due to drop to 180 under the previous plans. Hinting to strengthen cybersecurity, Johnson said Britain will deploy more armed forces overseas.
The first outcome of the integrated review was the government's decision to invest an extra £24 billion in defence, allowing the wholesale modernisation of our armed forces and taking forward the renewal of our nuclear deterrent.
Experts and campaigners believe the British government's decision violates international law. Director of the Nuclear Information Project, Hans Christensen, describes the UK announcement as deeply disappointing. Moreover, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has also called the UK's move as utter hypocrisy, as Britain earlier showed concern over Tehran's nuclear ambitions.
In Germany, Angela Merkel's party has hit its lowest popularity level in years as anger grows over coronavirus management. The Forsa poll showed party dropped 4 percentage points in a week to 29%. This is the lowest level since the start of the pandemic in Germany and follows historic defeats in 2 regional votes. The Greens gained 3 points to surge to 21%, while the other main parties stayed unchanged. Polls say rising infections, vaccine problems, and insufficient comprehensive testing systems are main reasons for the party's decline. A small South Korean island, which is left with only 4 children, symbolizes the country's demographic crisis. In 2020, the World Bank reported it to be the fastest aging society with the lowest birth rate across the globe. More in this report.
Liu Chen-hee, one of the last children on a remote island in South Korea, wishes to have more friends to play with. His 2 younger sisters and a friend are the only other children on the island Nok-do. The once vibrant small fishing village on the island is now on the verge of becoming depopulated. It is left with only 100 residents, most of which are elderly people.
Seoul is so crowded, noisy, and the air is not good. However, Nok-do has no traffic. Isn't it noisy and the air is clean? I can play outside more actively, so I like it here.
After South Korea's economic boom in the 1970s, as more and more women entered the workforce, family planning campaigns became very active, sharply declining the nation's birth rate.
It would be an empty island if the number continues to decrease. It saddens me. I want to protect Nok-do, but it's depressing to see fewer and fewer people here.
According to the World Bank, South Korea's fertility rate dropped to a mere 0.84 in 2020 from 4.5 in 1970. The Bank of Korea expects the nation will overtake Japan as the oldest society in the world before 2045.
European stocks are trading mixed as investors are awaiting the Federal Reserve's monetary policy announcement, central banks' forecast for the economy, inflation, and interest rates. London's FTSE has dipped close to 0.5%, while the Pan-European Stock 600 and the CAC 40 in Paris have shed marginally. Italy's FTSE MIB and Frankfurt's DAX have edged up fractionally above the flat line. Earlier, all Asian bourses declined. football, Real Madrid have strolled into the quarterfinals of the Champions League, beating Atalanta 4-1 on aggregate. They comfortably beat Atalanta 3-1 at home in their second leg of the knockout stage to qualify for the final 8 for the first time since 2018. Karim Benzema drove Real into the lead in the 34th minute, netting his 6th goal in 5 games. Skipper Sergio Ramos and substitute Marco Asensio further capitalized to seal the win for the 13 times European champions. Meanwhile, Manchester City marched into the quarterfinals for the 4th straight season. Pep Guardiola's side defeated Borussia Mönchengladbach 2-0 in the second leg to complete their 4-0 aggregate win. A draw on Friday will determine the final of the quarter contests. In tennis, world number 5 Stefanos Tsitsipas has eased into the second round of the Mexican Open in Acapulco. The Greek star beat French Benoit Paire 6-3, 6-1 in just 69 minutes. Tsitsipas will now face the big serving American John Isner on Thursday. In another contest, Italian qualifier Lorenzo Musetti defeated Argentina's Diego Schwartzman in the first round. Musetti secured a 6-3, 2-6, 6-4 win over the 9th-ranked Schwartzman in a stunning success. Meanwhile, Milos Raonic sent down 13 aces as he dominated American Tommy Paul 7-6, 6-4. It's now time to take a look at the weather. And for the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.